Okay, so this is tonight's homework. Today is Tuesday, February 4th. So tonight's homework, the directions say solve. Remember, answers should not be left as improper fractions. So we've learned a few different ways to show our work for these types of problems. A says 3/4 times 16, which is the same as 3/4 of 16. So if we were to draw a model of this, what we're essentially looking at is this. Our total is 16. And we're looking at what 3/4 of 16 would be. 3 out of 4 pieces. So that's our unknown. So 3/4 of 16 we can rewrite as 3/4 times 16 over 1. Now we can multiply across the top, multiply across the bottom. So on the top it would be 3 times 16, and on the bottom 4 times 1. So at this point, I'm going to show you two different things you can do with this. So the traditional way, 3 times 16 on the top, I just come to the side, 16 times 3. 3 times 6 is 18. 3 times 1 is 3, plus 1 is 4. 48 on top, and 4 times 1 is 4. So then we have an improper fraction that we cannot leave that way. So what we're going to do is read it top to bottom. 48 divided by 4, and we're going to solve that out. So what goes on the top goes inside the division house. So we have 48 divided by 4. 4 goes into 4 one time. 1 times 4 is 4. I subtract, get 0. I need to bring down. So how many times does 4 go into 8? It goes in exactly 2 times. 2 times 4 is 8. I subtract and get 0. So my answer here is 12. But I'm going to go back to this step right here, where it was 3 times 16 over 4 times 1. Now at this point, what you can do is you can look for two things that have factors in common, two numbers that have factors in common. And here I see 4 and 16. And what I mean by factors is this. What times what gives us 4? Well, we know 1 times 4 equals 4. I know 2 times 2 equals 4. Then I do the same with 16. 1 times 16 is 16. 2 times 8 is 16. And then 4 times 4 is 16. Now, my goal here is to pick the biggest factor that they both have in common, the largest factor that they both have in common, and that ends up being 4. So I can use that to divide. Divide 4 divided by 4 I know is 1. And because I divided this by 4, I need to divide this by 4 as well. 16 divided by 4 I know is 4. So then when I rewrite this, it looks like this. 3 times 4 over 1 times 1. Now 3 times 4 I know is 12. 1 times 1 is 1. 12 over 1 is like the whole number 12. And that's my answer. So this ends up being a little more advanced way of solving that problem, and I would caution you not to try this way unless you feel really confident about it, because we're not just like canceling out and making and guessing what numbers we can change these to. So if this is a little bit of a confusing step, I'd like you to continue what we've been working on, which is that traditional multiply across the top, multiply across the bottom to solve that, and then divide out when you get your improper fraction. For B, B says 2/5 times 20, which is the same as 2/5 of 20. So if I were to draw a tape diagram, my total is 20. And I'm going to take 2/5 of this. So I'm going to draw 1, 2, 3, 4 lines to split it up into 5 equal pieces. 2/5 would be 2 out of 5 pieces. So it's 2/5 of the 20 total, and that's our unknown. So 2/5 times 20, again, I can rewrite as 2/5 times 20 over 1. Multiply across the top, 2 times 20 is 40. Multiply across the bottom. Actually, let me show you that step. So we'd have 2 times 20 over 5 times 1. 2 times 20 equals 40. 5 times 1 equals 5. So we have 40/5. We can't leave it that way. We have to divide it out. So I'm going to go to the side. 40 divided by 5 is how we read that. The number that comes first is our dividend. It goes in the house. And our numerator becomes our dividend. Our denominator is our divisor. And the divisor is the divided by number that goes outside the house. And now I'm thinking 5 times what gets me close to 40? Well, you can skip count by 5s and you'll find that 8 groups of 5 gives me exactly 40. So 8 times 5 is 40. I subtract 40 minus 40 and I get 0. So here my answer is 8. If you wanted to try the common factors, so that would get back to this step here, 2 times 20 over 5 times 1. I look for something that has common factors, and it would be the 5 and the 20. I can do 5 divided by 5, which changes that to 1. 20 divided by 5 is 4. So here I have 2 times 4 over 1 times 1. That ends up being 8 over 1, which I know is 8 whole if you solve it that way. All right, and last but not least is C. C is probably going to be your trickier question on tonight's homework. Okay, don't let it totally trick you. So with order of operations, we know it's like, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. Okay, so multiply and divide, you work left to right. Add, subtract, you work left to right. So you do parentheses and exponents, multiply and divide left to right as they come in the problem, and add and subtract left to right as they come in the problem. Parentheses is always first. We say parentheses, me first, please. So this part here is what we're going to solve first. We have 4 plus 1/2, which I know is 4 1/2, 4 1/2. And I'm going to bring down my operation and my other factor. So now this becomes 4 1/2 times 12. All right, now this looks tricky. We've been doing problems where we have a fraction times a whole number, but sometimes when we see this mixed number times a whole number, we get a little tripped up and we're a little bit confused. Don't let that trick you, because we know how to take 4 1/2 and write it in terms of an improper fraction. We use that football helmet method like this. So you start at the denominator, and I'm going to start by saying 2 times 4, and I know that's 8, right? So I keep that number 8 in my head. Now I'm going to add my numerator. 8 plus 1 is 9. I keep the same denominator, which was 2. So 4 1/2 is the same as 9/2. 2 times 4 is 8. 8 plus 1 is 9. Keep the same denominator, 9/2. And then I'm going to bring down that multiplication sign and the 12. Now this looks a lot like what we've done in the past. At this point, I can rewrite this as 9/2 times 12 over 1. I know that's 9 times 12 over 2 times 1. All right. Now, right here, I'm going to drop down, and I'm going to show you the common factor method for this step. Okay, I know that 2 and 12 have a common factor. I can do 2 divided by 2. That'll give me 1. 12 divided by 2 gives me 6, because 6 times 2 is 12. Now this becomes 9 times 6 over 1 times 1. 9 times 6 is 54. 1 times 1 is 1. So I see my answer is 54. Now, again, if this method is tricky, don't try it. Go back up here and just multiply across the top, multiply across the bottom. Okay, so I have 9 times 12 on the top. I'm going to just come to the side and do 12 times 9. 9 times 2 is 18. Carry my 1. 9 times 1 is 9. Then I add 1 to make it 10. So 12 times 9 I see is 108. And then 2 times 1 is 2. I read this fraction as an unfinished division problem, top to bottom, 108 divided by 2. And I'm going to come to the side, and I'm going to divide that out. 108 divided by 2. 2 doesn't go into 1, but it does go into 10 5 times. That 5 goes right above that 0 there. Make sure it's lined up perfectly. 5 times 2 is 10. I subtract and get 0. Now I need to bring down that 8. 2 times what gets me close to 8 without going over? Well, 2 times 4 gives me exactly 8. 4 times 2 is 8. I subtract and get 0, so I see my answer here is 54, but I want to bring it right down here and show that 108 halves is the same as 54. So that's my final answer. I want to make sure that in my problems I've gone back and that I've circled my final answer for each of the problems there. All right, good luck with your homework tonight. See you tomorrow, guys.